Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today, we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls. So we're currently in one of the weirdest situations in the entire NBA. Over the past couple seasons, they've made a commitment to trying to win now, and it's kind of blowing up in their faces. Zach LaVine has been inconsistent. Lonzo Ball, who knows when he's going to come back. DeMar DeRozan has been pretty good, but he's not getting any younger. Nikola Vucevic hasn't exactly been a great trade. The team as a whole is 9-12 on the season, sitting at the 12th seed in the Eastern Conference, and it doesn't feel like they're any closer to contending than they were last season. They right now have two paths ahead of them. Do they blow things up, or do they stick out with what they have? And either way has really big flaws. Let's talk about why the Bulls have been so bad so far, what decisions they have to make, and if there's any way out of this cycle of mediocrity that they might be stuck in. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and let's go ahead and talk about the Chicago Bulls. By the 2021 trade deadline, Zach LaVine had established himself as a star in Chicago. Maybe not necessarily a franchise player, but someone that they could definitely help construct their team around. So to help him out and finally give him some aid, they traded for Nikola Vucevic, giving up Wendell Carter Jr., who was a young promising center but hadn't really thrived in Chicago, alongside 2 first-round picks. The first one of those picks turned into Franz Wagner, who seems like he'll probably be an all-star one day, and I'm a believer that Wendell Carter might be one too. So already that trade doesn't look great. When you factor in that second first-round pick comes this season where the Bulls have been mediocre, that trade is already kind of a disaster. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a fan of the trade for Chicago when it happened. I thought, oh, they'll be fine. They really won't have any high-level lottery picks. I was wrong. I will completely admit that, but it did make sense to give Zach LaVine some help as he was an upcoming free agent very shortly. So you had Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic. You also bring in DeMar DeRozan, who played like an all-NBA player last season. He was underrated when he was in San Antonio, a borderline all-star, and then completely revived his career playing for the Bulls and looking like an MVP candidate for most of the season. They also brought in Lonzo Ball, a high-level playmaker, defender, just someone that could do a bit of everything, and this core group of guys was a really solid team. I think people forget how good the Bulls were for the majority of last season. 60 games into the year, on February 24th, the Bulls were in sole possession of the first seed in the Eastern Conference. They were 39-21. They were really good. Of course, they were plagued by injuries. I actually found this one graphic on the Bulls subreddit that I'm going to flash to y'all now. Shout out to the person who made it. That kind of shows when some of these injuries happened, including the Lonzo Ball injury, which we will talk about a lot later. Patrick Williams hardly played, Alex Caruso missed a lot of time, and Zach LaVine was in and out of the lineup in addition to Lonzo. So it was a pretty injury-riddled season for them, in addition to COVID protocols, which they were the first team to really get hard by towards the beginning of the year. But overall, pretty successful season, making the playoffs for the first time in a while. Yes, they would end up getting smacked around by Giannis and the Bucks, but overall, I would say it was a decently successful season. Then we get to this year where the injury issues have mostly cleared up outside of course, once again, Lonzo Ball, who we will get to, but they look much worse. One of the biggest reasons why Chicago has struggled has been the play of Zach LaVine, who's having one of the worst years of his Chicago tenure, despite now being on a max contract. Right now in the season, he's putting up 20.9 points per game on just 53.5 true shooting percentage, which is 5% lower than the league average, and this is the 3rd worst mark of his career. Additionally, he hasn't put up this low number of points since 2017, his very first year in Chicago. So the question is, what is going on with him? And there are a few factors I think we can take a look at. Firstly, Zach LaVine has started to settle for way too many jumpers. This is a stat that comes from my guy Jacob, aka Rusty Buckets. I'm sure you've seen his content before, but I'll leave it in the description in case you want to see his full video about Zach LaVine that he did on his second channel. But in that video, he mentioned a stat that really stuck out to me. A couple years ago, Zach LaVine was taking 40% of his shots around the rim. That has slowly continued to decline to the point where now he's only taking about 24% of all of his shots within 3 feet of the basket. That's weird. That is really strange for a guy that, when you look at him, you typically think of him as a high-level slashing athlete, someone who can attack the basket, dunk on you, finish around the rim at a high level. That's not become his game anymore. Now he takes a lot of jumpers. He settles for a lot of three-pointers, and last season they were falling at a very high rate, so it worked better. But this year, as his jumper has become more and more inconsistent, it's taken a heavy toll on his game to the point where if he's not hitting his jumpers, he's not affecting the game that much because he's not a great playmaker, and he makes a ton of poor decisions, especially when he chooses the shots he wants to take. Like we talked about, he's already straying away from the rim probably way too much for what he should be doing, but also some of the shots he just decides to take, he'll take moving threes, he'll pull up when it doesn't really feel necessary, when there's plenty of time on the shot clock, they can find a better look. look. Sometimes it goes down because that's the caliber of player Zach LaVine is, but there are a lot of times where it feels like if he just worked for a better shot, attacked the basket, something else, they could get a lot better offensive rhythm going. There was one game where he was so bad shooting the ball and so detrimental to his team in decision making that he got outright benched down the stretch of a close matchup. That's something you really don't see for most max players because a lot of guys are still bringing value even if their shots aren't falling. Zach LaVine himself said that you don't bench stars like me down the stretch of these games. He really called out Billy Donovan at the end. He said that's a decision he's going to have to live with. But Zach really was tearing down the team with his play. I believe it was his dad, Zach LaVine said later, even told him, no, you needed to be benched. That's how bad you were, which is not at all what you want to see from a guy who's supposed to be one of your franchise players. Then there's the Lonzo Ball situation where he joined the Bulls on an $80 million contract last offseason and was really, really good when he played. He was their best three-point shooter for a lot of the season, their best playmaker, one of their best defenders. He was just a great connecting piece. Everything that they did heavily relied on the great play of Lonzo Ball. And when he comes back, I do believe this team will be much better. The problem is, we don't know when he's going to come back. The injury that he suffered was in January of this year. It's about to be a year since he's gotten hurt, and we still don't know even if he can run because Billy Donovan said recently that he's really not responding well. They tried to do some things and he's still not really able to run or cut or do any of the high level physical maneuvers it takes to play a game of basketball. If he's not even running, he's probably still months away, right? Because he still has to ramp up to the NBA level of physicality. I think there's a real chance we don't see him again this season, which is scary because now if you're the Bulls, you've lost a year and a half of Lonzo Ball. And like I said, when he comes back, I do think they will be much better. But the question is, when will he come back if he even does? Now, they do have other guards, guys like Ayo Dosunmu and Alex Caruso, who are both solid, but just don't bring what Lonzo does. Ayo is great, especially for a young player. He did a lot of great things in the absence of Lonzo last season. He's just not ready to be a starter on a high-level competing team at the moment. Alex Caruso, same thing. He is really, really good. Very underrated in my opinion. One of the best guard defenders in the league. He can knock down some shots, make some good plays. He is a big reason why the Bulls were able to stay afloat a lot of games, but I just don't think he really brings what Lonzo brings as the high-level shooter, the playmaker, the defender. Just the combination of everything he does is something that Chicago doesn't have anywhere else on their roster. Then there was Nikola Vucevic, who was having one of the best years of his career when Chicago traded for him, but hasn't been that player since getting here. Whether that's just because he's getting less touches, he's not really the focal point of the offense anymore, whatever it is, or even just old age, Vucevic has not been the Nikola Vucevic that they were looking for when they gave up Wendell Carter and 2 first-round picks. He's been fine offensively here and there. He's been really inconsistent though, and he needs to be a lot better to make up for the complete lack of defense that he plays. Patrick Williams, who they selected 4th overall a couple years ago, was supposed to take some kind of leap this season. Last year he missed a lot of the year, so maybe he's still just getting back to form, but right now it feels like he's just basically the same player that he was as a rookie. Really the only consistent bright spot for them has been DeMar DeRozan, who last season was an all-NBA player and had an MVP case for a lot of the season. That's how good he was, knocking down back-to-back game winners. Absolutely absurd from him, and this season he's still been pretty good, albeit not quite up to that all-NBA second team level that he had last season, but it's not enough to carry this Bulls team past kind of mediocrity. So the Bulls have 2 paths. The first one is they just keep this thing going, see what they're able to make happen. Maybe Lonzo comes back eventually and you're able to regain some of that form. Patrick Williams takes a jump. He's shown some flashes here and there. Zach LaVine gets his game back. Vucevic just plays solid or even like okay defensively. Maybe you find your way back up into the playoffs in the East, but you're still not a contender in that case. Even if you make some trades to bolster this roster, which they do have the pieces to do so in, say, a Kobe White or Patrick Williams as just a couple of young guys on the team. You could even deal Ayo Dosunmu if you really wanted to go crazy, but I don't see any pieces out there that they could bring into this current squad to make them a championship contender. They just don't really have the supporting cast. They'd probably have to give up one of Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan or Vucevic. Vucevic is probably the odd man out once again there, but I just don't see anybody that's available on the market that's going to make them better than, say, a Boston or Milwaukee. Then there's a second path where you just blow this thing up. You trade Zach, you trade DeMar, you trade Vucevic, see what you can get for those 3 guys. Maybe even trade like an Alex Caruso. Patrick Williams probably stays on this roster as your 4th overall pick recently. See what he's made of, if he really can be a piece for the franchise going forward. Maybe you even deal Lonzo Ball if he's able to come back and recuperate some of that trade value. But you just blow this thing up because you realize it's not going to work long term and you don't want to be stuck in mediocrity. You also get the chance to get your 1st round pick this year because while in theory it goes to Orlando, if it lands in the top 4, Chicago does end up keeping it. So if you end up getting the worst odds, albeit I don't know if they're able to completely out-tank some of these other teams in the NBA at the moment, but if they can get down to those best odds in the league at the number 1 spot, then they have a pretty decent shot of getting one of the top 4 picks. However, there still is the case where in the draft lottery, even if you have the top odds at getting the number 1 overall pick, there's a 48% chance that you fall to number 5. So it's basically a coin flip where they tank their entire season, giving up on this era as a whole, and there's still a coin flip chance that they don't end up getting their draft pick, which is very, very scary, and one of the reasons why I don't know how viable this path is either. I think blowing it up is the path to go, but it's the one that I don't think the Bulls will take. They made way too much commitment to this era, bringing in so many different guys, and even if you end up just making the playoffs for one series where you get swept, it brings in a lot of money, it brings in fan excitement. I know there are a lot of Bulls fans that aren't excited about this team at all because they know even if they make the playoffs, they don't really stand much of a chance, but I don't think the general management is going to see it that way. I think they'll say, hey, we can keep being competitive, maybe we get Lonzo Ball back and all of these things fall our way and suddenly we're good again, but you and I know that this team is not a contender and they should probably blow this thing up. Appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and comment down below letting me know what you think the Chicago Bulls should do. Should they blow this thing up, or do you think there still is a chance they could turn it all around? I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.